Okay, welcome back, dear viewers, to part two of my deep dive into Cowpunchers Reloaded by the Basic Expert. Prior video, I just discussed the basics and character generation. This, we're going to get to the rest of the book, combat, downtime, and some of the other stuff that's in there. Um, for those who are maybe first seeing my channel for the first time, what I typically do is I play games, I record myself playing those games, and then I do a deep dive into the game. I got nothing against the flip through review, but sometimes I find that a game that's fun to read when you buy it is not as much fun when you play it. And sometimes books that are horribly designed in terms of outline and whatnot, and layout, are actually a lot of fun to read once you're able to learn the rules. And I just want you to spend your money appropriately, and know what you're getting into. um, this is, as the Professor Dungeon Master has announced, Independent Game Month, and my channel is typically aimed towards non-Wizards of the Coast games, but I'm really happy to talk about Cowpunchers Reloaded by the Basic Expert. It's just a great cowboy game, straight up from the movies. I'm going to be running it next week, hopefully at VentureCon, and then at the end of the month, I'll be doing a one shot for y'all. And Yeah, you'll be able to see how it kind of plays out. But it's a very simple system, and we'll just be getting into the combat um, today. So let's begin. All right. So essentially, there's two broad steps to how um, the basic expert sets up combat. The first is sort of determining the facts in the encounter, and I like how he actually states that. Counter building, I think, is a bit of an art form for game masters. If especially if you're going to stick to the die rolls, right? The random encounter die rolls. So I like how he just simply calls it the facts of the encounter. So what are the facts? Well, you have to figure out surprise, the range, reaction roll, and whether or not people are going to engage in the encounter or try to get out of it. So what you're going to find though in Cowpunchers, it is not like D&D where there's an initiative and then everyone takes their turn and this, that, and other thing. No, to kind of simulate the cinematic insanity that happens in gunfights, there is no initiative. Everything is happening simultaneously. And what really matters is if you get surprised, caught flat-footed. You can actually see John, the basic experts, the influence of Traveler in how he sets up the combat system here. So basically, you roll a core die plus your smarts plus analyze skill. The analyze skill is about your ability to sort of see things and quickly, calculate whether something bad's about to happen. And if you fail, um, you are caught flat-footed and you cannot attack. You can still dodge, and we'll get to that in a minute. And if the second round of combat, you roll again, but if you're still surprised, you can now move and dodge. And then by the third round of combat, you'll start acting normally. So if you're caught flat-footed and bullets are flying, there's a good chance you're not going to make it. Um, Range is pretty straightforward: 2d6 times 10 in yards. In the wild, 2d6 in town. Pretty standard. Uh, Reaction rolls. This is kind of an OSR influence here as well, and I like it. I think it's important especially when you're using random encounters. But it's 2d6 plus the number of successes on a social skill roll that a player may want to use. So you stumble upon some bandits, and someone wants to use their strong arm skill. That's sort of like an intimidation, and then you'll add to the roll and consult a chart, and it's really simple. Immediately attack, keep talking, or they're friendly. And then the game master, through their discretion, can kind of interpret what that means. And then you determine if there's going to be a combat or not. And if the bad guys or the posse, the players, decide to escape, or there's chase rules that we'll get to in a minute. Um, so step two, the combat round itself. Okay, there isn't, like I said, there's no initiative. Everything's happening simultaneously, and if you have conflicting situations, whoever has the most successes gets resolved first. It's a little, in my opinion, a little confusing here because everyone's like shooting at the same time. So it does read to me that it's possible two guys shoot each other and die in the middle of combat. That's how I would run it anyway. Um, if I'm wrong, you can correct me in the comments below. But that's my interpretation of how this is working out. Um, and the combat round is essentially broken down into these steps. You can move your full move in yards, and if you've been knocked prone or something, you getting up is requires you to use half your speed rounded down. You then all declare targets, and you must be in range. So if you're planning on punching somebody, you better have moved into melee range, right? If you have pistols that you're going to use that have a rather short range and they're outside of range, you'll be having penalties to the attack roll. And then, of course, the attacks. You use the appropriate skill, and then the defender has a couple options. If it's a ranged attack, they can try to dodge, and that's a finesse check. And if it's melee, they can try to dodge or counterattack. So this, if you've watched a lot of spaghetti westerns or some of these old golden age of Hollywood era uh, cowboy movies, the fights are just a slugfest, right? And I think that's really cool that this mechanic is in here. It makes combat interesting and fun, and lethal. So they're not going to drag out. You're going to have something resolved relatively quickly, especially once you get a hang of the rules. And if you've watched the last video, the rules are pretty simple. It's just a dice pull mechanic. So, okay. And then at the end of the round, you check for morale, and it's just a simple smarts test. And then repeat the process as needed. There is no clear defining sort of situation when morale is to be rolled, like you would see in a BX game or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or something. So you kind of have to sort of get a feel for it. But if you've played OSR games, you kind of know. But other than that, I mean, that's it. That and then you combat ends, you tend to the wounded. But that's just the basic overview. So let's get into the combat actions itself. So the original game, the image of which is on the screen right now, and it was just like a 24-page booklet, didn't have this fanning the gun. If you know what that is, in the movies, it's when you hold the trigger down and then you just basically actuate the hammer with the flat of your hand and rapidly fire. Um, it's a cool little cinematic thing you can do. And what I like about it here is it's not an attack roll, rather it's a saving throw. I liken it to almost like a breath weapon, right? Because just there's this hail of bullets coming at all these dudes. And the difference here, though, the saving throw is on a 4 plus instead of the standard 5 plus for success. Targets cannot be behind cover, which is interesting, and we'll get to cover in a minute here. But if the target is hit, you roll how many bullets hits them, and then you roll damage. So it could do a lot and get a guy. But you can also do multiple targets, in which case, for every success you get, or I'm sorry, for every failure on the finesse save, they're hit by 1d2 bullets, and then you roll damage. So you could take out a couple guys doing this fanning the gun thing. Multiple attacks per round. Some weapons can fire many times in a round. Every time you fire, you roll one less die from your dice pool. And that's just the way that works. Very simple. Now, here's where we get into some of the neat stuff here. Dodge. So someone's shooting at you. You dodge. You declare you're going to dodge. So you roll a core die plus your finesse bonus dice, if any, and then any cover bonus you might have. On a success, you take no damage. Equal to or less than, you take half damage, and if you fail completely, you're taking full damage. Okay, pretty straightforward. It's kind of like a saving throw, if you want to think of it in like from a standard D&D perspective. Counterattacks. You have melee or fisticuffs. Those are the skills. The one with the most successes wins. If there is a tie, they both hit each other. So you can kind of see how um, these combats can really whittle down opponents pretty quickly. The cover rules and concealment rules are interesting, and I like them a lot. If you have cover, which full cover, which is 90% or more, half cover would be 50% to 90%. You get automatic successes on your dodge. It's not an extra bonus die; it's an automatic success. And if the opponent is hits you, you're taking quarter damage. If you're you know fail the roll or whatever, right? Half cover is half damage, and you get one automatic success. Concealment, you don't get the damage reduction, but you still get those automatic successes. So if you're like hiding behind smoke or fog or something, it's very simple and effective, and I think encourages players to engage in dynamic combat, not just sit there and declare I'm gonna hit. No, it's like no, I'm gonna roll, I'm gonna dodge towards the wagon and hide behind the wagon, and like, maybe that's about 50% cover, that sort of thing. Damage is pretty standard. You just roll from weapon damage, right? Firearm damage though is pretty cool. The basic expert has put a ton of firearms in here, and including different types of ammunition that is based on rarity depending on the type of gun you're using. And all the guns are characterized by decade. He did a lot of research into this, and it's pretty cool. But guns do exploding damage. For every six you roll again. So the guns are, you don't want to get hit. You don't want to get hit by a gun. Um, he's got some fun death rules here, and what happens when you hit 0 hit points. You will fall unconscious on a failed vigor save and start bleeding out, and you take 1d6 points of damage that go directly to your finesse or vigor attributes, randomly determined. When one of those reaches zeros, then you're dead. Okay. You can stay conscious and continue to act, kind of like that dramatic moment when you're holed up in a some homestead somewhere, and the bad guys are just shooting at the building, and you're in there, hit a couple of times, you're still up, pointing your gun out the window, taking shots. I just saw this in a movie called Old Henry, which is a fantastic film, by the way. It's one of those sorts of moments. So like, but if you get hit, all the damage you take is going to go to finesse or vigor depending on what the random roll is, and if those reach zero, then you're dead. Okay. You can stabilize someone with a first aid check. One success for unconscious, two if they're unconscious and have been losing finesse or vigor. So if you don't get to them quickly, the following round or two, they've been taking damage. So you're going to actually have to roll well to stabilize someone. Um, and then a revived posse member will lose 1d3 points to a random attribute permanently to represent this sort of like life-threatening wound. I love that. I don't think there's enough of stuff like that in role-playing games. You're like this hero gets reduced to 0 hit points, and then get someone cast a spell on you or something, and you're back up and you're fine. Like I like scarring. I like permanent damage. It adds a level of realism that I just like. So this is very cool. Reloading is a really cool mechanic because it is grounded in realism. It's not, oh, I'm going to reload my gun, and then 2 rounds later you're shooting up the storm. No, 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 no. Guns take a while to reload, and each weapon has a reload speed, which represents a 10-second round. So if it's got a reload speed of 6, it's going to take 6 rounds to reload it. However, if you are a skilled user of guns, you can make a skill check to reduce the number of rounds to reload equal to the number of successes you make on the skill check. So let's say you have 3 successes, you're now down to 3 rounds to reroll the thing. Okay, and then to make this even more dramatic, the following round you can just make a basic finesse check to try to reduce the speed, um, or excuse me, increase the speed upon which to reload on subsequent rounds. So you make your skill check, you're down to 3. The following round you make a finesse check and you get 2 more successes. So that means it's loaded, and next round you start firing again. So um, I can see players getting very anxious in a heated gun battle, trying to reload weapons while you know pistols and rifles are going off. I think this is great. I I just love it. Of course, there's dueling rules, and these are pretty lethal and dramatic, and I love it. Essentially, attacks are the same. It's just the damage is different. So when you declare that you're going to duel a guy, there's no dodging because you're both standing there at high noon, staring each other down. Okay, and rather than roll damage, you roll a d6 and add the number of successes from your attack roll. On a 2 through 5, you roll damage normally. Okay. Um, on a 6 or more, essentially, that's a kill shot. It's insta kill. That's it. And it's possible that you kill each other. So, very, very cool and simple mechanic for that. Um, Chases. I When I first read this, I have to admit I kind of glanced over it. I didn't realize how neat it is. But they're designed to be cinematic, and you essentially, the beginning of that encounter, right? You determine the distance, and then you have to figure out what everyone's speed is, right? And you basically use the same combat round mechanics and the phases, but during the movement phase, you got to make a riding check, and it's a contested roll. The one being chased, if they succeed, they increase their distance by 4d6 yards. If the pursuer succeeds, they, I should say, decrease the distance by 4d6 yards. Got to have at least one typo in every single one of my videos. Anyway, but that's it. And then of course they're shooting at each other. So if you're thinking like a wagon, right? Someone and getting chased by bandits, people are shooting out the back of the wagon. I mean, it's one of these sort of, again, cinematic sort of things that are built into this game. That is done very well. Every round there's a hazard check with a single d6 roll. On a 4 plus there's something, and then there's a d66 chart you can consult. 3 different types of hazards. A regular one will slow the participants down. Dangerous hazards may injure a horse or damage a wagon, for example, and then severe hazards may even cause death or destroy the wagon, that kind of thing. There's really no mechanics associated with it, so it's going to be up to the range boss's discretion on how they apply it. But if you looked at my last video, there is a section about making skill checks where you can increase the difficulty for a successful check simply by requiring additional successes rather than the standard one to succeed. So there would be one of these times where you'll want to consult that. Okay. Okay. Downtime activities. I wanted to highlight this piece of art here. Actually, it's one of my favorite from the book. But I love it. I think it's cool as hell. But healing and recovery, 1 hit point per day, so long as you're not starving or dehydrated. Attributes also heal 1 per day, randomly determined. I'm sure if you wanted to have like some kind of medicine or first aid check, you can increase that if you really. That'd be up to the range boss's discretion. There's Trailblazing Rules. That's essentially overland travel rules, and it's very standard. If you've played OSR games, a lot of this is going to look similar. And he also includes a random encounter table as well for moving across the plains. Other stuff you can do. Capturing outlaws. I like this too. This is fun. So like, um, you could have a completely cool thing, like it just emerge in an OSR sort of sandbox fashion where the players encounter a random group of bandits. they kill them, or maybe kill half of them, take their bodies back to town and discover, oh, hey, look, they're outlaws. They make some money off of it, and then they learn that the ones that got away may be worth even more or something, right? So now all of a sudden you have like this adventure that just sort of sprung out of the blue here. I think it's great. I really like the fact that he went into starvation, thirst, and disease. I grew up in the era of the Oregon Trail, this old video game. You may have seen memes about it. So and so died of dysentery, right? It was dangerous out there, and not just because of the conflicts with Native Americans or bandits and other roguish types out there. You could get sick and die. Now they're optional rules. He even says so. It might be a little too realistic, but I think it's great, and I like what he's done with the disease rules itself. Basically, every disease has sort of like a randomized time for it to sort of run its course. And during that time, there's a randomized number of vigor checks successes that need to be accumulated. And you make these daily vigor checks. If you do not make that number of successes before the time passes, you die. Okay, so you won't know what's happening or how long it's going to take. You just got to do it. So it makes it very unnerving and maybe a bit anxious if you've caught cholera or dysentery or something. And of course, while you're affected by these diseases, there's going to be effects on the gameplay as well. Like you'll lose dice or whatever. It's all pretty much a you know unique or individual to the diseases, and there's a handful of them: malaria, cholera, dysentery, influenza, pneumonia, things like that. Very cool. I love it, and if I ever ran a long-term campaign, people would be dying of dysentery, I assure you. Okay, one of my favorite parts of the book is homesteading, partly because, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but when John was talking about expanding the rules of Cowpunchers, I was watching the show Yellowstone, and I'm like, it'd be really cool to have rules to run a ranch. And he's like, okay. and he came up with this beautiful abstract, simple way of running a homestead. And it could be anything you want. You could have a cattle ranch where you're using your animal skills. You could actually have like a field of corn or whatever. That's your agricultural skill. Or you could be prospecting for gold. I love it. I absolutely love it. And you make two checks a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. There's some penalties that could be incurred if your character's not there or you haven't hired the right people to sort of manage the property while you're gone. But on a success, you then roll a d6 and multiply by 100 for every 10 acres owned, and that's how much you gain. And if you fail, it's the same thing, except it's the number of money, how much money you lost. And then, of course, you can't influence these rolls by taking hit point loss because that would be cheating. I guess it would break the game, and that makes sense to me. So, but yeah, really simple, really simple. There's a section immediately after this about debt and selling off your property, and you could do like an entire campaign centered around like a gold mine that the posse is trying to uh, make money off of, and fighting off claim jumpers, maybe fighting off Native Americans who are claiming that you're on their land and stuff like that. Random other things that could happen. So you could have it's a wonderful addition to the book, and giving you another option for your own sort of adventures and campaigning. Okay, so we're on the last slide, and this pretty much is going to end my deep dive, but I did want to mention there is a bestiary and NPCs to run your own games. There's two adventures in the back of the book as well. I haven't played them yet, so I don't want to comment on them. But I know I did a bit of a review of the one that was in the original Cowpunchers book on my blog. If you want to take a look at my first impression, it's there, and the I did want to point out that the very first chapter of this book gives you a brief overview of the historical context of the game. So you do not have to be a scholar um, of American of the American West. You don't. You get just enough to get an idea of the aftermath of the Civil War, homesteading, conflicts with Native Americans, gold mining, the trains that were and the robber barons setting up shop as they go across the Midwest, the influx of Chinese immigrants. You get just enough to get an idea, and then you can do what you want with it, which is exactly what I prefer to have. There's a book, just to kind of compare, there's a book I backed on Indiegogo a little while ago. And I think it was, yeah, it was Whitechester. Cool concept, right? It's an undead city, right? But the first chapters are just too thick with historical like I don't need all that information. I really don't. Right? So, cool book. I enjoyed reading it, but just I didn't need. I skimmed. I went. My eyes glazed over, and I wanted to get to the zombies. So Cowpunchers does it right here. It's just brief, just enough to get you in the mode of American Western, and get you playing. So, guys, $64,000 question. I think you know the answer. I think you've known the answer. I love this book. I think the game's fun to play, and it's for $35 for 100 and how many pages was it? 147 pages physical copy. To me, this is a no-brainer. Pick it up and have some fun. Um, so that's it for my deep dive. Again, next week I will be at VentureCon, so I probably won't be making any videos. I might make some shorts or something. Um, but the following week, I will start talking about some supplements for cowpunchers and adventures that have been written by others, because the Basic Expert has an open gaming license for this. And then at the very end of the month, I will be running a one shot, so that all of you can see how the game is played. So stay tuned. And once again, thanks for watching. Oh, and I need to mention this one last thing. Now have over 400 subscribers to my channel. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been sharing my videos, liking and subscribing. Please keep doing that. If you're new, hit like and subscribe. But I do appreciate it. This is just kind of a fun little thing I'm doing, and I hope you find the information I provide you, valuable. I may be doing a few more, game mastering philosophy type videos in the future, but predominantly I really want to go into these deep dives. I think they're just fun to do. So, and hopefully informative, so you're not wasting your money on a crappy game. But anyway, that's it for me. Take care, everyone.